We are talking about resistance and learning tonight. And the first thing I wanted to do, I got to open up my notes here, is read to you a definition for the word resistance. But before I do, I'd like you to give me a couple of synonyms or a short phrase that you think defines resistance. What do you think it means to be resistant, to resist? What is that? Unmotivated. What else? Hesitant to embrace something, bored, create barriers to doing something, pushback, uncooperative. These are good. Disinterested, unmoving, low self-esteem. Any others? Anxious, needing to be perfect, defiant, strong sense of self, trauma from educational systems, uninspired, avoidant. Excellent, excellent. Okay, my guess is when I asked you to define resistant, you had probably a child learner in mind. Is that true? If it's true, say yes, just so I can see if my guess is right. Yes? Yes. Okay. So the next thing I want you to do is to define the word resistance, but I want you to remember the most recent time you were resistant. Maybe someone invited you out for coffee and you didn't want to go. Maybe you got in a spat with your spouse. Maybe you did not want to be pressured into whatever. Think about a time you were resistant and what was the definition of what that resistance was about for you as a grown-up. Burnt out, overwhelmed, anxious, tired, exhausted. A lot of tired, exhausted. Torn away from plans I wanted to do. Uninterested. Indignant, holding my ground, worried it wouldn't be perfect, unsure. Don't you think it's interesting that the definitions did not repeat identically? There were some identical ones: unmotivated, disinterested, might not be perfect, but there was a lot more exhausted, dislike, spread too thin, wasn't something I agreed with, burnt out for yourself, but there wasn't any burnt out, tired, overwhelmed for the kids. Did anyone else notice that? I wish I could see your faces so you could all just nod your heads or shake your heads. My guess is that you did notice that there was a little bit more graciousness extended towards your adult self than toward the child. In fact, one of the resistance definitions I saw pop by was uncooperative. Uncooperative. I want you to think for a moment. Let's say a friend invited you out and you're overwhelmed and busy and you don't want to go, but you feel like you owe her because it's been, 6 months and you keep saying no. What if your friend defined your resistance as uncooperative? How would that land with you? Rude. Yeah. How else would it land with you? Abusive. So awful. Not knowing the full story, hurtful, disrespectful, inconsiderate. Oh my gosh. You guys pull no punches. Ugh, I hate how we do this to children. Further entrenching my desire to resist, lacking compassion, like there's a hierarchy, a lack of grace. This is so powerful. Unempathetic. Have you ever resisted your partner, the person you're either married to, dating, maybe a roommate? Have you ever resisted a request? Have you ever been then pressured by the other person, by them telling you you're being uncooperative, or how dare you, or it's the least you could do, or this thing has to get done, someone has to get it done? Have you ever had that experience? I've definitely had that experience. People respond to that in a couple of ways. This is my observation, pure observation. I'm not a clinical therapist or psychologist. I've read a ton of books. I've been in a lot of therapy. I am a 12-stepper. So I've been around the block on these categories. And the thing that I've noticed is when you feel pressured by someone to live up to their expectations and you choose not to cooperate, the other person usually blames you. They don't investigate to find out why you're not cooperating. This is in the dysfunctional kind of relationship. They assume that your lack of cooperation means something about them. Disrespect, not honoring their needs, not taking care of the family. They actually treat you as though you have motives that they can ascertain and judge. In a family where an expectation is placed on you that you don't fulfill, and the person sees you resisting, and it's a healthy dynamic, and they say, whoa, that's not like you. Normally, when I'm like, hey, let's, clean the house on Saturday morning, or let's get the yard in ship shape for fall, you're up for it. You're not. Tell me more about that. I want to understand. What does that feel like? Can you feel the shift? Can you feel the difference between those two ways of approaching resistance? So there's the kind of the kind of approach to resistance that makes you want to double down or buckle under if you're afraid of the person. With children, you'll have one child who just deep sixes their feelings, and instead of resisting, they cooperate, but they're like building a mountain of resentment. And then there's the other kind of child who makes a federal case, who is more loyal to themselves than they are to your plan for their life. They sort of drive a stake in the ground, and they're like, the more you push me, the more I'm going to make it clear that I cannot be pushed. The definition of resistance, according to Merriam-Webster, the refusal to accept or comply with something, the attempt to prevent something by action or argument. So it's a refusal to accept or comply. It can also be characterized as an attempt to prevent something, and you do it through an action or an argument. That is what a resistance person is. That's what resistance is. So I want us to just think about all the definitions that we created. We are assigning those to our children. We're literally saying, when we see them as resistant, we are labeling them as a person who doesn't comply or accept our leadership. We start from the assumption that we know best, and our children are fighting what they should accept as the best. Who decides what's best in a family? How do we know what's best? We look at our kids and we're like, if I left the candy jar open, they would just binge and eat it all. I have to regulate their food intake, right? That's how we understand it. A child looks at the candy jar and says, candy is amazing. It tastes wonderful. I love eating it. And so we have two competing ways that we interpret the value of candy. Resistance comes when there is a clash of values. When we say a refusal to comply, what are they refusing to comply with? They're refusing to comply with your values. It's a clash of values. You do not agree. And what we do in our families is we power over children with our adult authority, and then we get annoyed when they actually put up a fight to say, I don't see it the way you do. Now, does that mean they should never do math? They should only eat candy? It doesn't mean that. But we're not going to get to regulated candy and accomplished math with a resistant child. Here's what happens if your child is resistant for a period of time. They will slowly drain the life out of your relationship with you. It will start showing up in passive aggressive and openly aggressive ways that have nothing to do with the catalyzing event. So if your child is like, I hate math, you keep forcing it, and then you're enforcing no candy, and then you're enforcing limited TV, and then you're enforcing a limit on computer games, and then you're enforcing bedtime, and then you're enforcing what time they get up in the morning, and then you're enforcing which shoes they wear when they leave the house, and then you're enforcing who they're allowed to play with. Pretty soon, that child is like lava building up. They're like, when does it stop? And so they blow up over the wrong thing. I will not brush my teeth. When every other night of the week they brush them with no problem. Or this is the day when I throw myself on the floor and I won't do spelling, even though they seemed like they used to love spelling. Or I don't want to play soccer, when you've never seen them not love playing soccer. It's like the buildup of all that management that doesn't really take into account their natural reactions to those things create in your child the explosion of resistance that we then say is unmotivated, bored, uncooperative, obedient. That's the language of my generation. And your child is basically just, I'm going to pull up this flag I have here. It says UCLA on one side, but they're like literally waving a flag. They're like, if I throw a big enough tantrum, will she see that I'm not happy? With Noah, he literally had to tell me that he hated his life before it caught my attention. The slumped shoulders, the slinking around, the poking his sister, the kicking his feet under the table, his sloppy handwriting. Those are all signs of resistance that I ignored because he was accomplishing my goals. Till finally one day, he just woke up and said, I hate my life. That is where it's gone for too long. I was not catching the clues. Resistance in learning is information. It's not a character flaw. It's not a moral issue. It's actually really good information. It means your child is in touch with their feelings and feels safe enough with you to risk expressing their truth. When we dismiss it, fight it, dislike it, we're literally telling our kids, you can't be yourself around me. Don't you dare show me your unhappiness. To be in my presence, I need to see a cooperative, happy child. That's the only kind of child I want in this house with me, because I am not stable enough, strong enough, grounded enough to deal with your moods. That will really throw me off, and me being thrown off is way worse than you being thrown off. So I'm going to make you deep six those feelings to make me feel better about my life. And, you can do that with 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. By 15, not so much. And then we're like, whoa, what's going on with my 15-year-old? Well, it's been building for a decade because we've been training them to hide what makes us uncomfortable. So resistance is a gift. Resistance is a gift. It is telling you very important information that what you are offering is not yet meaningful to the child on the child's terms. Now, the way school copes with this is they assign grades, they involve detentions, they involve parent conferences with the teachers, they shame kids in class, they set really strong rules with really clear consequences. And I'm not saying that those are all bad. They're not all bad. You're trying to move 30 kids through material over a certain number of days, and parents are counting on you to do it. And so we've set up this system that really crushes resistance and honesty about how you feel about your learning, which is why so many people, by the time they're in high school, they want to ditch school, or they want to cheat, or they want to perform really high for the grade, right? It goes both ways. You've got one kid in the family who ditches school 100 days and the other one is 4.0. It's a response to the same thing. It's, how do I cope with doing the thing that I am expected to do? Am I going to perform, or am I going to reject performance? But there isn't like an authentic, do I like what I'm learning? Does this seem valuable to me? Is this the way that I want to learn it? Is this the pace I want to go at? Is today a good day to work on it? Is this the right pen to use to work on it? I remember I had a teacher who made us write vocabulary words every week in a notebook. And we had to write the word, the pronunciation, the definition, and a sentence using that word. And we had to do it in pencil. And I didn't like using pencil. I felt like it wasn't dark enough. I didn't like the feel of pencil in my hand. I was a big pen person. and you would get marked down if you didn't use pencil. And this was basically, you're just copying a dictionary. It was like copy work from a dictionary with a sentence. It was very tedious. It felt pointless. I don't think it improved my vocabulary. And yet it was a big part of my grade. And I learned to perform it correctly, right? That's what we're talking about. Kids who are in school learn how to conform to the context and not express their true feelings. So now, let's think about the home environment. Home is not like school. Home is the place where people should be able to tell the truth. So when your child is like, I hate math, take that seriously. It doesn't mean it has to stay that way, but pretending that it's wrong to feel that way. And I say pretending because it isn't wrong. You're trying to get your child to believe it's wrong to have a feeling they have. So if they say they hate math, you have to start by taking your child seriously. The only antidote to resistance is believing the person who's resisting. Resistance is a form of communication. And when we treat resistance as illegal, like not permissible, what we're actually telling our kids is, you are not permitted to have a real feeling about this math. So we're asking them to hide it from us, and we're acting like the feeling is wrong. We're literally teaching them to ignore an internal warning sign, which is danger, danger, danger. You're asking me to become overwhelmed, tired, exhausted. You're asking me to knuckle under, to give up my feelings, to assume your meaning is more important than mine. That's what we're saying. Now, I know you're thinking, yeah, but they have to do math. They do. They do, but we're not going to get that math done if the structure of the home is that your child has to pretend to like math in order for you to feel good about it. The antidote to resistance is listening to it and receiving it. That is the antidote. It is making big space and room for resistance to exist. It means when it shows up, you're almost excited about it. You're welcoming it. You're like, oh, wow, you really don't want to do copy work. I see you sliding off the chair and rolling your eyes and now rolling across the kitchen floor. Sounds like copy work is not on your mind. We start by actually mirroring our child's experience. Now, I will tell you, one of my strategies that I used with resistance was to do exactly what my child did. So if my child was sitting in a chair and they're like, I don't want to do it, and they start doing that, then I get in a chair next to them and I go, oh my God, I bet you don't want to do it. And just like that. If they pick up their book and put it away, I just walk right with them to where they're putting it away. If they stomp their feet, if they get angry, you can actually embody the resistance with them. When Noah said, I hate my life, I didn't say, no, you don't. You have a great life. I said, whoa, it must feel horrible to wake up in the morning and your first thought is, I hate my life. Oh my gosh. Wow. That is a big statement, honey. I hear you. The first thing to do isn't fix it. It's to get it. They're like throwing up flares. They're like skywriting. Math is terrible. And we're over here. Yeah, but you have to do it. You're so unmotivated. You're so disobedient. You're so uncooperative. But when our friends do that to us for not wanting to go out for coffee, we're like, you know, how rude, how inconsiderate, how uncurious. Can we at least give our kids the courtesy we wish a best friend would extend us? So what do we do about this math? We're at home. We're not at school. Our kids feel free to tell us the truth if we've created an emotionally safe space. And the way that you know it's safe is that they're telling you, and it's annoying, and it makes you feel irritable that you have to put up with this resistance when you have so much to do, and this is your responsibility to ensure that they get an education. Yes, you have real feelings too. You might even be able to express those feelings sometimes, like with a 12 or 13-year-old, you might be able to say back, you don't want to do math. Well, it's pretty annoying that you don't want to do it because I feel pretty responsible for you to have an education. We must be at an impasse. I don't know how to solve this. You don't want to do it. I think you have to. Shoot. What are we going to do? Let me make a pot of tea. We have to talk. But is that what we do? Tell me what you do that's different than that. What do you do when your child tells you they don't want to do something that you know they need to do? What is the usual strategy? You have the conversation over and over. Yes, it never stops. It does not stop. There is not a cure-all because you have to keep modifying. So you might find a program that works well this year, and then next year they're bored of it. Or the work gets harder and they need a tutor. Or they used to be a night owl and now they're a morning person. Or vice versa. Or they're in a growth spurt and they need to eat sandwiches while they do math. Things change. There's no magical elixir, right sentence, perfect smile on your face that's going to eliminate resistance in learning. I'm looking at your comments because suddenly they're coming in beautifully here. They can't get up until it's finished. I try to explain why they have to. It doesn't help. I ask for their way of meeting their need and getting it done. Get it done and then we can whatever. Oh my gosh, I've said that thousands of times. I try to explain it to him, but if he doesn't agree, I try to make him do it anyway. I post the state requirements. I ask if there's somewhere they would want to do it, like asking them to eat green eggs and ham. I did some mindset reframing with my daughter and that helps so much. Ask when they will be ready to do it. Would you like to do math in a tree? Sometimes I offer to do something restful with them for a few minutes and then come back. Depending on how regulated, we might just take a break. Sometimes a dance party or snack is needed. We got a doorway swing this year and it is a game changer. Okay, somebody screenshot that. Often I just ask them if they need to swing first and they will swing for a few minutes and be ready. Creative solution right there. Beautifully creative. Take screens away. I tell her I don't want to make dinner, fold laundry, but I buckle down and do it. Oh my gosh. Okay, these are so honest. Thank you for telling me the ones that you're like, should I share this? That one where we say, look, I do things that I don't want to do. Let me tell you something I feel about that. I don't recommend that strategy. You want to know why? What you're secretly, unintentionally communicating to your kids is adulthood's terrible. I just do all these things I hate and I don't enjoy it while I'm doing them. So you got to start practicing for that adulthood right now. So that's not helpful. And children don't have responsibility. They don't. You brought them into the world. They didn't pick the house or the size of it or the scale of it. They didn't shop for clothes. You might have bought them 100 items of clothing and they could get by on just one outfit. They have no say over any of that stuff. And then we start assigning them responsibility based on our choices. That's really hard on kids, whether it's chores or schoolwork. So part of where we want to go is not, look, I do things I don't want to do, but really recognize that you're at a point where you see the value in washing dishes. You see the value in keeping the house clean. You see the value in providing healthy meals. That is actually why you do it. And there is a certain amount of satisfaction that you derive from doing those things. So what you want to say to your kids, a way to handle it with your kids is, you know what? There are tasks in my life that at one time, I didn't think I wanted to do them. They felt tedious and dull. And I had to really dig deep to sort of understand why they were important to do. And so I want to help you have that experience. Let's talk about math. I want us to partner. I want us to experiment. And if it's really still a struggle and we're not really landing on it, then I want to come up with this compromise. We are going to need to keep doing math, but we are going to limit it to fill in the blank. This number of minutes with a snack each day while we continue to problem solve. So you're not caving. You're not building this relationship where your kid can just say, I hate my life, and then they never do anything because they're children. They're not mature yet. But we also don't just keep making withdrawals on the emotional bank through insistence, coercion, shaming, blaming, controlling, and ignoring their loud sirens of emotion. Does that make sense? So resistance to me is a signal that there is more meaning that needs to be created for that action to be valuable to a child. Now, here's what's really interesting to me. We've been doing Brave Writer for almost 25 years, and everybody I've ever met as an adult, except for your really wonderful grammar nerd, linguistic type people, found grammar kind of irrelevant in school, found writing hard, didn't really understand why reading comprehension was a thing, right? Don't feel like they know all the rules of spelling and punctuation perfectly. Like that's the majority, 80% of adults I meet, that describes them. So then they turn around while they still don't value any of those things for themselves, and they expect their kids to value what they don't value, that they learned in a format that didn't work, and they use the same format to teach their kids, and then are bugged that their kids are resentful. Does any of that strike you as true? I remember when I realized that math was terribly hard for me my whole life, and I still hadn't really come to the conclusion that math was valuable as an adult. So why am I going to start teaching my kids math using a system that failed me and then just expect them to plug through and suffer as much as I did? So I took on very early becoming interested in math. And I started reading every book I could about math instruction for children so I could get some new models, because the one I had used failed me, and I did not want to just use the failed model with my children. And you know what? I learned a lot about math, and we actually led a pretty mathy life now when I look back. At the time, it was so unconventional, I couldn't tell if we were learning math. Weirdly, 3 of my kids got A's in pre-calc, and the 2 who didn't take it are self-taught computer programmers studying pre-calc now as adults. Like, we did enough math somehow. I think what we're talking about here is, how do you get to a place where you aren't just enforcing a standard of school completion, schoolwork completion, and you're actually invested in the subjects themselves and making them come to life, not for your kids, but for you, not just supervising paperwork, but making it meaningful. If your child is showing resistance, the first question isn't just, how can I make it meaningful for them? Ask yourself, is it yet meaningful for me? Am I drawn into verbs? Do I get why it would be interesting to study literary devices? Are the books I'm reading aloud captivating for me so that I want to talk about them? Part of what overcomes resistance is your engagement and delight in learning. Okay, I see a lot of chatting here, so I want to come and check. Sometimes resistance is a sign of biological and health issues that need attention. 1000%. You know, Jacob at one point could not see, and we did not know it. He walked into a brick wall and we had to have his eyes tested, and suddenly discovered he couldn't see. He needed glasses. Here we are trying to teach him to read. He can't even see the page. You know, you don't know what you don't know. So resistance sometimes can mean that there is learning challenges or some kind of disability. We definitely are prone to holding our kids to expectations that we don't even find realistic for ourselves. True. So true. One of my kids would get low blood sugar and become this resistant Tasmanian devil. Give him some food and he became reasonable again. Yes, this is why I'm all about context, you know, have a candle, have a drink. Maybe my son, Liam, he needed his binoculars so that he could look at birds while he was doing math. He just wanted to keep track of the birds, you know, as long as he was facing a window. Now, that didn't work for writing. I've shared before that we had to do writing at night when the windows were dark, right? So you have to figure out your child, just like you had to figure out you as a parent, as a wife, as a mother, as a person. Same thing. We stumbled into meaningful learning this year, both fell in love with astronomy and Greek mythology. We have been springboarding off of that for writing, reading comp, and geography. It totally took me by surprise, and I found myself scrapping all kinds of plans I'd made. Amen, sister. That happened to me. We got involved in astronomy and Greek mythology, which led to all things ancient Greece, Egypt, and Rome. Took us 2 years. I remember the day when Rome fell And I told all my friends online, I'm like, hooray, Rome finally fell. I can't wait to get to the Middle Ages. My kids couldn't have cared less about the Middle Ages. But, like that's when so much learning happens. And when they're in that white hot heat, you can actually bring in every subject. Remember the old continent of learning? Can make math meaningful because now you're studying the shape of pyramids, and then you're making them with, sugar cubes, and then you're measuring the geometric sides. And then you go back to the math book and find problems that relate to what's real in math. All right. Well, thank you for joining me tonight for this wonderful webinar. Bye, everybody.